Welcome back. It's time to talk about linear light. Now this is a super powerful blend mode. It keeps middle 50% gray invisible. Anything that's lighter than that gets a linear dodge, and anything darker than that gets a linear burn. So if you remember from our linear dodge and burn, these are pretty extreme examples, but they're not very saturated. So it adds subtle coloring, but it will really lighten or really darken your photo. Now this is also part of our Special 8 group, so opacity and fill will look different when you change those levels. So in this example, we're going to add some really nice color, and we're going to put them in our shadows, and then we're going to use luminance blending to basically remove them from our highlights and get a really cool effect. Okay, so we're in our sample images, chapter 3 and section 17 on linear light. So let's go ahead and open up our image. I'm going to hit F for full screen and grab a solid color fill layer. There we go. And I'm just going to go ahead and change this down to linear light. So we can see when we're in our lighter blending modes, it's basically adding a version of linear dodge. And the darker we go, it's going to add a version of linear burn. Now these are like less powerful versions of linear dodge and linear burn. And you can probably see already, like these, it's a pretty strong effect. So most of the time you're going to want to lower your opacity or your fill. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like. Now our opacity of 50%, I'm going to hit V and then 5, so we see what opacity of 50% looks like. And let's just call this O50 for opacity 50. And we'll make that invisible. Bring our opacity back up to 100 and hit Shift 5 for a fill of 50. So here we have a fill of 50% versus an opacity of 50%. And the opacity of 50% is just a little bit more subtle with this effect. Now I kind of like the fill effect here. An interesting thing that we haven't really done so much of is used luminance blending in conjunction with these blending modes. So I want to do that because I like the greens that are here in the highlights, and I want to keep some of that. So let's go ahead and double click on our color fill layer. There we go. And now I can hold Alt or Option, and I'm going to go from the right to the left. So hold Alt or Option and grab this, and it's going to make this layer invisible where the underlying layer is lighter. Okay, so the lighter areas, it's starting to disappear. You want to make sure you got your feathering. So, because if you just click on this and move it, you're going to see you get like a pretty harsh transition. So make sure you hold Alt or Option and click on it, and then you can see it starts to feather out. And there we go. And here you can see you've got your fill slider and you've got your opacity slider, so you can see what you'd like to do. I'm going to work on my fill. Okay, there we go. So basically, our linear light is doing a version of our linear burn right now. It's not the exact same. Like if I go to linear burn, you're going to see it doesn't look the exact same. That's because linear light does a more subtle version of linear burn on the shadows and a subtle version of linear dodge on the highlights. Okay, so it's a really nice blending mode. Oh, go back to linear light there. And in this case, we've used it to add some interesting complementary colors to the shadows. So we do have, let's lower our opacity a little bit there. So we have some nice greens in our photos, and we have the magentas, and they're complementary colors, and I think it works really well on this photo. So linear light is going to lighten your photo and darken your photo depending on what's on your layer. Your colors are not going to be really saturated, so it does give a really nice effect for coloring. I do highly suggest lowering your opacity or fill, because oftentimes this layer is like, it's a bit on the strong side. So lowering your opacity and or fill is going to really help out with that. Next, we're going to talk about pen light, which uses a combination of lighten and darken blending modes to get you some really interesting results. All right, guys, we'll see you in the next video.